Atheists insult Mel, but he raises the Bible and a miracle happens. Mel Gibson walked down a street in Los Angeles, dressed in simple clothes and a cap that barely concealed his identity. Since the premiere of The Passion of the Christ, his life had been full of ups and downs. However, something inside him always kept him firm in his faith. With a Bible under his arm and a rosary hanging discreetly from his wrist, he decided to stop in a nearby park to reflect and pray. Suddenly, a group of young people approached him. There were about 10 people, some with banners and T-shirts containing atheistic messages and mocking religions, especially Christianity. One of them recognized him and, laughing sarcastically, exclaimed, "Look who it is, the defender of religious fantasies. How does it feel to know that millions believe in your stories, Mel?" The actor calmly gave them a serene look. "Faith is not a tale, it is a gift," he replied in a calm but firm voice. The young people, far from calming down, began to make more aggressive comments. "Your film is nothing more than propaganda to manipulate weak minds. Stop imposing your retrograde ideas on the world," they shouted while others took out their phones to record the moment, hoping that Mel would react impulsively. However, he simply took a deep breath, clinging to the Bible he carried with him. The situation became more tense when one of the young men came closer, trying to take the Bible from his hands. "What are you going to do, Mel? Defend this book full of stories? It's just paper." Mel, not giving in to the provocation, raised the Bible high and in a clear voice proclaimed, "This book is not just paper. It is life, it is love, it is hope. And I will always defend it because in its words, I find the truth." His gesture and words seemed to echo in the air, but the young people continued to laugh, mock, and create a circle around him. It was then that something completely unexpected happened. A strong, warm wind began to blow out of nowhere, causing the leaves of the trees around to rustle and the nearby birds to take flight. The Bible in Mel's hands seemed to glow in the sunlight, breaking through the clouds, and a sudden silence fell over the place. The young men, confused, stopped laughing. One of them pointed to the sky, his eyes full of disbelief. "What is happening?" The wind seemed to intensify right where Mel was standing, but not in a frightening way, but as if it enveloped the actor in a kind of warm, protective aura. At that moment, Mel closed his eyes and began to pray out loud. "Lord, enlighten these young people and teach them that your love is greater than any doubt or ridicule. Fill them with your peace and transform their hearts." As he spoke these words, a white dove descended from heaven and rested on the Bible he was holding. The crowd that had gathered around could not believe what they were witnessing. Even pedestrians who were not part of the initial conflict began to stop, taking out their phones to capture the incredible moment. The young men, who moments before were mocking Mel, began to back away, some with tears in their eyes, as if something inside them had suddenly changed. "This can't be real," one of them whispered. But Mel did not stop praying. His voice grew louder, and at that moment, the wind suddenly died down, leaving an atmosphere of absolute silence. An elderly woman in the crowd broke the silence by saying, "God is here. I can feel him." The woman's words seemed to touch the hearts of everyone present, and one by one they began to kneel, including some of the young men who had been insulting Mel a few minutes earlier. Mel Gibson slowly opened his eyes, still holding the Bible with the white dove perched on it. His gaze swept over each of those present, noting how the mood of joking and aggression had given way to one of wonder, humility, and reflection. The young people who had previously challenged him now looked bewildered, as if an invisible force had touched their hearts. "I didn't come here to convince you with words," Mel said, his calm seeming to emanate from deep within. "God's love doesn't need to be demonstrated with debates or discussions because it is within each of us, waiting for us to accept it." A young man, who seemed to be the leader of the group, stepped forward a few steps, his face reflecting a mixture of embarrassment and curiosity. "How can you be so sure of all this? How can you believe so much in something you can't see or touch?" he asked in a fearful voice. Mel smiled slightly, carefully lowered the Bible, and extended a hand towards the young man. "Because even if you don't see it, you can feel it. Even if you don't touch it, it transforms you. God is present in every act of love, in every moment of forgiveness, and in every heart willing to open itself to Him." The young man, still undecided, looked at his friends, seeking support. However, some of them no longer shared the same defiant attitude. One of them even had his eyes filled with tears and seemed to be struggling to control his crying. "I don't know what's going on," the latter said, his voice breaking. "But I feel something I've never felt before. It's like I've been carrying a weight all my life, and now it's just lifting." The ever-growing crowd began to gossip, many commenting on the miraculousness of the moment. The white dove took flight over Mel and the youngsters before disappearing into the clouds. The sky, which had been overcast, cleared completely, allowing the sunlight to bathe the place in a comforting warmth. A woman with a baby in her arms came from the crowd and said in an emotional voice, "Mr. Gibson, what just happened here is beyond explanation. You are showing us that God's love is not just words, but a living thing. Could you please pray for us?" Mel was visibly touched and began to pray out loud for everyone present. As he prayed, the atmosphere seemed to be charged with a special energy. People who did not know each other began to hug each other. Others knelt in silence, and some simply looked up at the sky as if waiting for another sign. Among the young atheists, the leader of the group finally broke into tears. "I don't know what this is, but I want to know more. I want to understand what you understand," she said to Mel, still crying. Mel put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't need to understand everything right away. You just need to take the first step and open your heart. God will do the rest." The young man nodded, and his friends, though still silent, seemed more receptive. Suddenly, a voice rose from the crowd. "This should be known. The world needs to hear what happened here today." Several people began recording messages of hope and sharing them live on their social networks. Within minutes, the images of the miracle and the transformation of the young people began to go viral, reaching thousands of people in real time. As videos of the moment began to fill social media, reactions were not long in coming. Some comments in real time expressed disbelief. "This can't be true. It's probably a setup. It's just another strategy to get attention." But many others reflected the emotional impact it was having. "I don't know why, but watching this filled me with peace. I've never felt anything like this just by watching a video. Maybe it's time to reconsider what I believe." The atmosphere at the venue continued to change. People who had previously been just watching came closer to Mel, forming a circle around him. Among them were those who shared life stories. A mother struggling to raise her children, a young man who confessed to having abandoned faith after the loss of a loved one, and a man who said he had been an atheist all his life, but that something at that moment had made him change his own beliefs. Mel, with patience and humility, listened to each story. He did not try to impose answers or judgments, but simply spoke from his heart. "I'm not here to convince you of anything," he said. "I just want you to know that God's love is not something you have to earn. It's already there, waiting for you. He doesn't judge you for your mistakes. He embraces you because you are his children. The young leader of the atheist group, who still seemed to process what had happened, raised his hand as if asking permission to speak. I don't know if I can change. I've spent years making fun of things like this, years telling people that faith is a lie. How could someone like me be accepted by God? Mel looked at him with respect and replied, God doesn't measure your past. He looks at your present and your willingness to change. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and yet was forgiven and became the rock on which his church was built. You too can find redemption if you are willing to seek it. The young man agreed, wiping away his tears as a deep silence fell over the place. It was as if everyone present was reflecting on their own lives, their mistakes, and the possibility of a new beginning. Suddenly, someone from the crowd shouted, "Look up at the sky!" Everyone looked up and saw a bright rainbow forming right above them, even though it hadn't rained. People began to applaud, some crying and others just staring, moved by the beauty of the moment. This is a reminder, Mel said, holding up the Bible again. God always gives us signs, but we must be open to seeing them. He is always here, even when we think we are alone. Among those present, a man who appeared to be a reporter approached and asked, "Mr. Gibson, what message would you give to the world after what just happened here?" Mel thought for a moment before replying, "My message is simple. Never underestimate the power of love, faith, and redemption. We are in a world that needs more hope and less division. If this moment can inspire anyone, then it will have been worth it." Mel's words were echoed in live broadcasts, social media posts, and articles that quickly began to be written. What had started as an awkward confrontation in the street was turning into a global phenomenon. People shared the images of the miracle, the young people's testimony, and Mel's words, filling the internet with messages of hope and faith. As the rainbow continued to shine in the sky, the souls of everyone present seemed transformed. People began to approach Mel Gibson to thank him. Some asked for prayers, others simply sought comfort in his words. The young people who had started the argument ended up united in a hug, visibly moved by everything that had happened. "Today is not an end," Mel said, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "It is a new beginning. Each of you has the opportunity to bring this message of love and faith to those who need it. No matter what you have done, you can always return to the arms of God. Jesus is waiting for you, and his love knows no bounds." Mel, with a humble smile, took a moment to thank you as well. "I am just a man. This is not about me, but about God, who guides us and loves us unconditionally. Always remember that with him, everything is possible." Before saying goodbye, Mel invited those present to pray together, and the place was filled with an atmosphere of indescribable peace. As the crowd began to disperse, social media continued to explode with messages of hope and stories of how the event had touched lives beyond the visible. If you liked this story and want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and share this video with someone who needs a message of hope. Every time you share, you help preach the message of Christ to more people in the world. Remember that this is an imaginary story created with the intention of preaching God, Jesus Christ, and his miracles. As the Bible says in Romans 4:17, God calls things that do not exist as though they were, and they will come true. Have faith, because all things are possible.